Hello guys, welcome to this Houdini procedural modeling tutorial. We're going to focus on some modeling techniques, but modeling is not the strength of Houdini, and it could be if you're really smart and having a very technical way of viewing stuff. For artists, it's not very friendly, but we can nonetheless do some introduction to modeling. Just to get you familiar with the navigation and some of the basic modeling tools and the procedural way of doing stuff in Houdini, and also show you that what the strength is of Houdini is, so that you know why that it's really beneficial to use this piece of software to create anything that can be procedurally created and a lot of VFX related projects. All right. So let me turn on my wireframe here, the ground, so it's easier to see where am I. I'm gonna go to the network, press the tab button, and type in tube. It's gonna create a tube for me, basically a big cylinder shape. I'm gonna change the name of this tube by double clicking on it. I'm gonna change that to key. I'm going to model a key here. I'm going to double click to go inside, and that's actually what the node that is creating this cylinder shape. I'm going to change the primitive type from primitive to polygon. It's going to make a polygon out of it. I'm going to change the column amount from 12 to 16 just to give me more faces to work with, and change the head down to make it thinner. Now, one of the things I can change is dragging the slider. Another thing is holding down middlemouse button and drag these numbers. Now, if you're on the 10 number and you drag up, it's going to increment it by 10 every time. As you can see, the number down below is changing by 10 when I drag it. And you can change it by smaller numbers to fine-tune it. So this is kind of like an increment ladder to allow you to change things based on different degree. So it's easier to fine-tune and make big changes. Alright, so I'm just gonna make it center like that. And let me right click on the bottom dot of this guy and type in transform. What this does is gonna actually translate it. And let me actually use the scale here, and middle mouse drag the scale here to make it smaller. Oops. And I don't see anything. The reason being for that is because that this transform is not in the view mode. The view tag, which is the blue bar, is now on this node, so that I'm still viewing the old tube node. I'm not viewing the transform node at all. So if I go ahead and click on that, you can see now I can see the transform results, so that where you drop down or click to enable the blue bar, it's going to be where you're viewing this procedural process. So click on there, will show you the results of this node, which is transform. Now, if you want to see the original one also, you can turn on the template mode. So that's going to allow you to see this node, the result of this node, in a wireframe mode, so you can see both to use that as a reference. And that's what I'm going to do here. And I want to make it smaller, but I don't really want it to make it also thinner, meaning that I don't really want to change the Y direction of the scale. So let me grab that value and change that back to 1. That's going to bring it back to the original thickness. And I can go ahead and change the scale again if you wanted to make it smaller, but I have to change both X and Z separately because I don't want to touch Y anymore. But I don't really wanted to have to go change this guy and that guy the same, twice to make them the same. So I can literally hook those two guys up so that no matter what's in X will be also in the Z. The reason, the way to do that is right click on X and choose copy parameters, and you can go to the Z and right click on there and paste relative reference. What that does is basically telling the Z channel, okay, now U equals to the channel of the scale X, of the scale X of this node, which is transform. Alright. So now if I change the X, as you can see in the viewport, the Z also changes with it so that I'm always having a perfect circle. Okay, now if you really want to see the number results instead of this expression, you can click on the scale. This is going to toggle between the evaluation results and the expression, if there are any, if there is any. Anyway, so now I have hooked up Z with X, so no matter what I change here in the X, Z changes with it. So let me just make this smaller. Alright, and then I'm going to merge these two together. So I'm going to drag from that dot and press tab button and type in merge. That's going to create a merge node or a operator. In this case, that's how they call these guys. So everything here is a operator. Or if you're familiar with Nuke or Maya, this is basically a node. I'm going to drag that dot from transform back to the merge. Now I'm basically merging these two together. Now if you turn on the merge display tag, I'm seeing both in solid mode because they're now all belongs to the merge. Let me turn off that guy. I don't really to see the template of the original shape anymore. Alright, so I have this guy now, and I just need to bridge the this loop with the outer loop so that I'm filling in the base part of the key. So let me press S to go to selection mode and press 3 to go to edge mode, and that's what this changes. So if you press 1, that's going to be the object mode, 2 is point mode, 3 is edge, 4 is face. So let me press 3, double click on this edge loop to select it, and I'm gonna press tab button in the viewport and type in bridge and press enter. That's gonna create a bridge, but it's gonna ask you like where do you want to bridge from those edges you selected earlier to, which is the destination polygons or edges. The destination is of course this loop, so let me double click on that to select this outer loop and press enter, and you can see Houdini fills the gap. But I do have a problem. It seems like this edge here is being bridged all the way to the other side, so that's not exactly what I want. It's bridged to here, as you can see. The reason for that is, let me show you, it's because of the original tube. If I move my display tag back here to the original one, and the reason I'm still seeing the results in the wireframe mode is because I'm selecting this guy here. If you go ahead and select back to the tube, you're not seeing that anymore. Now I want to turn on the face normal by pressing this button. You can see the normal of those faces are facing outwards. Now let's go ahead and turn on this transform, which is the smaller one. You can see now they're also facing outwards, so that in the merge node you can see now that both cylinders are facing outwards. Now if you really think about it, this middle part between those two cylinders are the inside of the key, so the normal here are actually flipped or in the wrong direction. So I have to flip them back. To do so, I can right click on this transform's bottom dot, which is the result of the transform, and I can type in reverse, and that's going to allow it to reverse the direction of the faces, and you can see the result here. And then let's go all the way back down to the bridge, and you can see the bridge is already working because the normal are now agreeing with each other. And let me go ahead and change the division on this bridge by selecting it and lower down the division. Alright, let me bridge the bottom part too. Just need to go press S again, double click on this edge loop, press tab and type in bridge and enter, and double click on the outside edge loop and press enter. Alright, that's gonna give me the bottom part. I'm gonna lower down the division too. Okay. Now because this is all procedural based, let me turn on the normal here, so that the transform here also still works. So you can actually offset it from the center, which we all know that the circle, the circle on the base of the key is actually on the side, right on the back of the key. So I'm gonna change the translate X, minimal drag to the left. You can see that the cylinder is now moved to here, As you can see, the bridge also works. Everything still stays together. Right? That's one of the power of this procedural way. As you can see, that they're all based on those different nodes. And this is actually what's happening in Maya too. If I can show you that here real quick. Let me open that. Open Maya. But let's actually wait for Maya to open, and we can maybe move a little bit further on that. So let me go press 4 button, and select that face and that face. Come on. Maya is like the worst program that you ever will try to open. Crashes and freezes, and open weird windows for you, and still opening that for some reason. Okay, anyway, so if you do the same thing in Maya, like create a cylinder here and make it smaller, and then you can probably go delete the faces here, and if you can duplicate, Control D, right, and scale it in, you flip the normals and you combine those two. Combine these two, and then you select the edges and you bridge them, and you do the same thing here. And you're basically having the same kind of like inputs. If you go to the node editor here and see the input output of this guy, you can see the same kind of way, right? You probably bridge them, you unite, and you create the cylinder. But you can see Maya is a little bit messier actually. It's hard to see what's going on. It's not a streamline. And you can still do things, like you can still go back to this guy, and you can move it probably, which is probably cylinder 2, I guess. You can move it, and that still works, right? But it's just not that easier to understand because they're all separated. They're not a simple streamline. And also Maya have this function of delay history, which is Alt-Shift-D, and after that you cannot do anything with it anymore. You don't have that thing to move around. And in Houdini though, it doesn't allow you to delete history. It's gonna be always there. It's all procedural based, so that you can always go back and do changes, and it's always very straightforward, like the entire flow of the operations and everything. And that's why Houdini is stronger on this procedural way of doing stuff compared to Maya. Alright, let me go ahead and extrude that by pressing tab and type in extrude. I'm going to select the poly extrude here, and it gives you a handle here if you wanted to just drag it out this way. Alright, now I'm going to make the front face flat. And as you can see, when I do extrude, you can also see the extrude node being created. Let me press the 3 button to select the edge here, and press the T button. And as you can see, when I press the T button, it gives me this gizmo to move things. It also drops down a edit node, which is basically another operation that you can do. And you can see everything here you do is basically a node or multiple nodes in Houdini. So I'm going to drag it back, and in order to make it flat, I can turn on the point snapping and drag it back, move my cursor to this point. You can see it snaps to that point, which is basically make it flat. Alright. Let me also grab those two edges. I'm gonna actually press tab again and type in bevel. As you can see, we can do bevel here too. Alright, and this bevel will be dropped down here again. I'm gonna change the offset to bevel it. I'm gonna go ahead and change the shape to rounded, so that it's curved here a little bit. Can probably have more division to make it more smooth, depending on the requirement you have. Alright, let me grab that guy here. I'm going to actually bevel it to create the face that I want to extrude out the teeth part of the key. So let me press tab button and type in bevel again. and then bevel it out. Now as you can see, when you start creating all those things, it's gonna be messy real quick. So it's probably better to rename those guys to whatever you wanted to rename it. Like teeth base. This is what's creating the base of the teeth, and this is teeth base roundness, and this is teeth base width. It's basically controlling the width of the teeth base, or the teeth actually. Sorry. Alright. So after that, I'm gonna actually do some changing. First of all, I don't need the line in the middle, so I just need to go change the division to 1. I also wanted to make it symmetrical by connecting that vertex to that one. It's gonna be underneath the polygon. We have this poly split. It's basically the multi-cut equivalent. So let me click on that and that, and press enter to create that connection, and do that again on the bottom. Alright, so that's gonna be the fix of that. Oops. Let me press S again and go press 4 button to select the middle face here, and drop down a extrude, and use poly extrude here and drag it out. And that's gonna be the length, right, of the teeth part of the key. So I'm gonna call this guy teeth length. And I'm gonna drop down another poly extrude, and this guy will be just a little bit forward, and I'm gonna turn on the transform extrude front, and that's gonna allow me to transform it if I press enter button, or this guy here. It's the gizmo is over there, but I think I can do that. Let's drag this guy in. Whoops, am I doing this guy here? I don't know why it's not showing here, but let me try that again. So extrude and transform the front, change the scale on the Z direction. Huh, doesn't do much. Let me try to redo that. I don't know what's going on there. Maybe I misclicked something. Grab that and then do a extrude one more time. Turn on that so that I can just transform it, I guess. Drag the distance forward and scale it in, and also drag that guy inwards. This gizmo works like this. So this guy is like a oh, let me turn off the snapping here. This guy is the global scale, all 3 channels. The tail of this arrow here is actually the one direction scale, and the arrow on the inside is how you move it. If you want to rotate, you can press Y to toggle the gizmo until you have this circle kind of thing to rotate, which I really don't want to do that. Just need this little shape to define the end of the or the tip of the teeth. So let me change that to tip. Alright, so we have basically created the basic shape. Oh, I was actually pressing the escape button to get out of that operation. Let me also press S and drag to deselect that. Alright, so now we have the basic of the key, and it looks pretty good. And because this is our procedural, we can go back to the here, let me change that to base hole, and I can use that again to change where the hole is of the base, and it doesn't really destroy anything else. I can go back to the teeth base, right? I can change the distance there to define the base of the teeth, and I can go ahead and change the roundness of that to toggle or tweak that. I also change the width, and you can see everything is procedural, and it just works without too much worrying too much about what's happening before or after. Right. So this is our procedural based, and it's probably going to work and give you this option to fine-tune it later or create a lot of variations based on that. Okay, but before we actually create some controls for this guy here, let's actually finish the entire modeling process. So I can actually create the teeth maybe on this side, and the way to do that is maybe some like random shape here, and I'm just gonna Boolean it out using subtraction. Alright, let me drag this out to the side. I'm gonna create a delete. Okay. Now this delete will delete things, but it's not deleting anything because we didn't tell it to what to delete. And what I'm doing that because I want to show you that how those operators are working. If you go select this poly extrude, and you can see this poly extrude, if you scroll all the way up, it's extruding this group 86. Now what is group 86? Let's go back to the poly extrude tip here. And if you go on and turn on this face number here, and let's actually go back to before the poly extrude. And you can see this face is actually face 86. And that's what this extrude is operating on. So it's basically this guy here is extruding face 86 of the previous shape, this face here. See that? So everything is operating on that. Like the poly split is splitting, those two vertices, I guess. And the poly bridge is bridging these edges with these edges. Right? So every operator here can have a group target to work on. This deletes doesn't have any target, and that's why it doesn't delete anything. Now I know that I want to delete this face here, so I just need to type in 87 and it's gone. Alright, so I just want you to know that this is basically how Houdini works or operates out. Of course, I don't want to delete it. I wanted to actually extract that face to work on. So what I'm going to do here is choose the operation from delete selected to delete non-selected. That's going to give me the face. Let me actually turn on the template mode of the original shape. Alright, I'm going to shift this guy by using a transform. Check that out. And I'm going to shift this guy. If I select that and press enter, that's going to give me the gizmo and drag it over to there. But the thing is, if I give it a solid, fixed number here, when I go ahead and change the width, right? Although it kind of moves, but it doesn't really keep it in the middle of that. I want it to be like in the middle, just to make things look cleaner. So what I'm going to do here is right click on this offset amount and copy parameter. I'm going to go back to all the way back to the transform I just created. I'm going to right click on this number and paste relative reference, and that's going to tell it, okay, just move it halfway of the width of the base, the teeth, right? And if you look at the expression there, what it basically says is that find the channel of the word underneath the word, and you find this poly bevel teeth width, which is that bevel that will create the width of the teeth, right? And find its offset value and use that value as the translate D, so that you can communicate channels this way. Using expression, you may think that this is a little bit hard to understand by only looking at that, but this is going to be very beneficial to make the graph really clean. Again, if you compare that to Maya, if you do that in Maya, you can of course do expression, but in Maya you may need to go use this kind of way to connect stuff, right? And that's node connection. Now, the more you do, the more this cross-referencing will happen on the connection. It's really hard to read. And on the other hand, in Houdini, you're using expression to do that, so that you're not having this extra weird connection going all the way from the width here to this transform to create a super ugly line. And that's super beneficial to keep your graph clean, and I think that's why expression here is used tremendously inside of Houdini. Alright. So now what happens is that when I go ahead and change the width, you can see it's always like updating and changing the width of this guy too, and also move it or keep it there. Okay. Alright. So afterwards, I'm gonna give this guy some edge loop down the way in the middle. That's gonna be underneath the polygon edge loops. I'm gonna click there to create one edge loop. Then I'm gonna change the number of loops to something like higher. I don't know, 20 maybe, to create a lot of loops so that I can make some variations on the edge. I don't really need to see the number anymore. Let me also press S and drag a selection on the empty space to deselect all the faces. And I'm going to go ahead and do some variations on the position of those points. And that's going to be some new concept in Houdini, which is some node-based coding to tweak those vertex one by one. And that's going to be actually, if I drag down from there and press tab, a point VAP, which is a point vex operator. And a vex operator is using a node-based way to program using a language called vex inside of Houdini to do stuff. Every time when you see a node like this with multiple layers, that means you can double click on it to go inside. And that's actually the meat of this vex operator, which for now it's not doing anything. And this is the input, which is basically all the possible or default attributes of every individual point of this geometry, and that's the output that you can choose. You can actually reference other attribute you added later, but for now let's just focus on the things we have. So what I'm going to do here is drag out the position, which is the P here, drag it out and press tab button, and I'm gonna type in turbulence noise. Whoops, this is going to create a turbulence noise. And this noise will give you, in the default setting, a 1D noise, which is, based on the position of the point, it's going to give you some kind of noise here. Alright, I'm going to drag out from that noise. I'm going to type in floats to vector to convert that from a float number to a vector that has 3 channels, which is X, Y, Z, or RGB if it's a color, but they're basically the same thing. I'm going to connect from the noise to the value 3 because that's the Z direction, this direction, or this direction here, which is the only direction I care about, and the other 2 directions I don't really want them to be anything. So let me grab this connection and press the delete button to get rid of it. And then those 2 will use the default setting, which is 0, as you can see here. Alright, so that's going to give me a vector that is going to be having a noise or a variation on the Z direction. And depending on what point, or different point, will have a different value on the Z from this vector results. So I'm going to drag out from the P, which is the original position of the points, and press tab and type in add to add that with the noise I created. Then basically we're basically just varying the position of the points. We're adding a noise to the position of the points. The results goes back to the position, and as long as the instant that I connect those 2, and you can see that the points are now having different kind of position now, and they're only varying on the Z direction because the other 2 directions are adding 0, which means basically they're not changing on X or Y direction. Alright, so now if I go back to the turbulence noise, I can change the frequency to change the shape. I can also change the amplitude, and I can also change the roughness and all sorts of stuff. Alright, cool. So if you want to go back out, you can press the U button as up to go back, If you want to go in, you can double click. And if you want to go in, use shortcut, you can also press the I button as in. So I to go in, U to go out. Alright. Now one of the things about this control is that I cannot really change anything yet on this node. I have to double click inside to change this turbulence, which is a kind of like a annoying thing. So I'm gonna actually expose those parameters on this node to the outside, which you can also click here to go to different hierarchies. Let me go to the key, which is basically what these guys are. Where these guys are, you can also click on the object to go all the way back to the first node we created. Again, I to go inside, I need to select it and press I, so that I can expose those guys. Instead of having them here on this node, I can expose or promote those variables, parameters back to this node. So what I'm going to do here is holding down middle mouse button on the tab and choose to promote it. Choose to promote parameters to promote it. I'm going to do that here, almost everyone here, just in case I need these. And you can see they're grayed out here inside of the turbulence noise, and now they're available here on this node. If you scroll down, you can see those guys are now here. As you can see, when I change these guys, they're changing. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually let me go back to the transform here and press enter. If I can do that. No, it doesn't really allow me to do that. Anyway, I'm going to actually change the Y direction to make it go down, so that I can, I can extrude it up. To create a geometry that I can Boolean out. So, extrude and extrude up like that. Let's look at this extrusion here. You can see the top one looks good. The bottom doesn't really have a bottom face. To fix that, I just need to check on output back to fill the bottom face too. And that's going to be the one I use to subtract. So I'm going to drag down from the the beginning, or this guy here, which is, when we finish the base shape, we're going to actually drag down from there and type in Boolean. I'm going to blend that with this guy, and let's take a look at the results and turn off this. So this is going to be the union, the intersect of these two inputs, and I don't need that. And I'm going to change the operation here to subtract, which uses the first input A, subtract B. Of course you can do that, subtract this way too. Anyway, so now we have the teeth of the key being created. Alright, and I can go change the point VOP here. Let me actually change that to teeth shape. And this guy is now in charge of changing the shape of the teeth by changing amplitude, frequency, offsets, and all sorts of stuff. But this is one thing I'm regretting here. I don't really want it to be starting from the very beginning and all the way to the end. I want some space in the middle to breathe. So one of the things I can think of is that I can, let me drag these guys down. I can, before I, what's that, polysplit? Oh, that's adding edge loops. So before I do any, I can actually have it here after the extrude. So after, before I blend it, I want to scale it inwards. So let me create a transform here and drop it down here. The way I do that is dragging it to this line. It's gonna actually make it the middle of the flow here, and I can probably change the scale here to make it shorter, right, on the X direction. But when I do that, as you can see, it's scaling down to that direction. The reason for that is because if you grab this transform and press the enter, I guess I have to show it and press enter. You can see the pivot is over there, which is this guy, and that's why when I scale it down, it basically squeezes back to the origin. The pivot is at the origin. So that's not what I want. I want the pivot to be the center of this object, which basically is the center of this guy. The problem is I don't know the center of this guy. Where is it? Now how can I even know that? There are multiple ways of doing that, but let me show you a different way. Actually, the one of the deepest way to do that, which is using coding, just to make this class as complete and informable with all the possible things. So I'm going to drop down a node here by right-clicking there and type in a attribute wrangle. An attribute wrangle is basically the code equivalent of this attribute Bob. Attribute wrangle uses VAX code directly instead of using node-based way like this. It's using a coding way right here in this text field to manipulate stuff. So what I'm going to do here is type float attribute bounding box center bounding box x, the center of the x, so whatever you want to name it. This is basically creating a new attribute. Maybe center x, so it's really easy to understand what it is. So I'm creating a float attribute called that, and it's going to be equals to the get bounding box center, which is this, and it's a function, so I'm going to give it a two parentheses, and the argument will be 0, and then semicolon to finish this program, and press Control Enter to run it. Okay, now it's giving me an arrow. Now let's explain what's happening here first. Get bounding box center will give you the center position of the bounding box, and the 0 means just getting the first input. So basically getting me the first input, which is this guy here, get me the bounding box center position. The problem is that I'm creating a float, and this guy gives me a position which is x, y, z 3 values, and that's why I'm getting this warning. So I'm going to type in point x, which is the x value of this vector, and Control Enter again to reevaluate. Oops, I did that. Control Enter again, and sometimes it doesn't update, so I'm going to click on it, and you see that warning goes away and everything works. Now what does this actually create is actually a attribute on this geometry, and to view that you can go back to the geometry spreadsheet, and you can see that there's an attribute called bbox center x. In fact, I can change it to something else, like bounding box, maybe bb center x, just to make it shorter. As you can see, then the attribute name changes here. So this is basically creating a attribute, and I want this attribute not on the points, I want it to be on the geometry detail. So I'm going to change that run over option to detail, so that it's going to be a attribute on the detail. Alright, now I have this information here. To use it later, I just have to go back to where I want to use it. The pivot x will be using that attribute, so basically at the b center x. Alright, so now what it does is just making the x value of the pivot to the bounding box center of this geometry. Let's go back to the scene view, and let's go back to the transform. Now if you go ahead and let's actually go all the way back to here. Now if you go ahead and change the scale, you can see now it's scaling based on the center, and that's a good thing, because if you go ahead and change the length of the keychain, the key teeth, you can see everything updates with it, because they're all because this shape here, this guy, changes with the length also. So it stretches too, so the bounding box center changes there too. Alright, so we're actually getting some pretty crazy stuff here. I just want to show you all the possibilities and the variations you can do with Houdini. And as you can see, we're already creating something looks pretty awesome, right? You can create a key that has a lot of options you can do. You can shift this around too. And they all work in a non-destructive procedural way. And again, that's the power of Houdini. Okay? Alright. So we have done all the things. Let's say I'm happy with the key now. But if I want to do some variations on this key, I probably need to go out to all those different nodes and change the stuff here, and that's going to be super time consuming. So I'm going to actually gather all the possible things that I can change and put them all together on a simple or single node so that I can do all the changes at the same time without having to move into different nodes. There are multiple ways of doing that. Let me actually show you one of the ways that is probably simpler. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press the tab button. Actually, I'm going to drag from there and press tab button. I'm going to create something called no. No is basically nothing, and it's an X shape. And as you can see, some of the nodes are having different shape to indicate they're slightly different things. And those kind of shape can actually be changed. You can grab that and press the this button here, or S. It's gonna bring up the shape, and I believe you can just click on anything to change it. So it's something you can choose too if you want it. I'm gonna choose this circle one because it looks way cooler, and I'm gonna call this key final, and this key final will have some attribute I'm going to add here to control the key, or I can call this key control panel too. Whatever you want to call it. Okay, I'm going to grab this control panel and look at here. It has nothing. Right, so I'm going to add some attributes. Let me just do some very simple ones by clicking that little gear button and go to Edit Parameter Interface. And that's going to give me this. And let me drag in a float right here on the root. I'm going to call this guy teeth length. I'm going to also label it teeth length. Alright, the type is float, and we're gonna do accept. Okay, now you can see a new attribute being created here, and it does have some value here that I can drag. Alright, I'm gonna right click on it and do copy parameter. Now go back to the node that is controlling the length, and that's why naming is really important. So you can really see that real quick. And you can right click on the distance and paste the relative reference. Oops. Paste relative reference and press enter. As you can see, it becomes super long because maybe that value is super long. But now I can go here and change it. By changing this value here, I can now tweak the length of the key. Alright, now I can do the same thing for a lot of other attributes. Let's say a new one, maybe the new float, drag it in, call it teeth width. I want to have a underscore just to make the label different from the name. Name is the internal attribute name. This is what's showing here. So I'm going to do accept here again. Now I have this teeth width, and I can go ahead and copy parameter, and I'm going to go for the width one, and paste it right here. As you can see, the width changes, which is probably doing too much here, so I'm going to go ahead and change that. As you can see, another thing I wanted to change is probably make the range of the slider to be from 0 to 0.3, I guess. So I'm going to actually change that. Go to the edit parameter reference underneath the channel part. Let me grab the width one, go to the channel part, and oops, actually this parameter part, change the range from 0 to 0.3. And accept. So now this guy can only change from 0 to 0.3, which is a more reasonable value range. Alright, so now I have the option to change the width, the length, and the width of this key now. And I can keep adding new attribute here to manipulate the key. Like I can probably change the size of the base here, you know, so I can create a new attribute there too. I'm not gonna do all these things there, it's because they're all repetitive stuff. Maybe just some variation here, like I'm gonna create a float vector 3 just to show you a different type. It's gonna be the frequency. Actually, I don't really need to do that. Let me grab that, and I think I can right click and delete it. Anyway, you can create all different data types. Just want to let you know that. And for the shape control, right, I can do that too. Can change the frequency, copy parameter here, and paste that on the other two channels, so that I can just go control that. And I need to create a new float guy here and call it T frequency, and do the same thing here, and accept, and copy reference, copy parameter, and paste it here on the shape. Alright, so I can use this guy now to change the frequency that I want to have. You know, a lot of things you can add here now to refine the shape of your key, and you can create a lot of variations of this key now with all the parameters available for you. Alright, that's gonna be it for the modeling tutorial. As you can see, Houdini is powerful for this reason. The procedural way of creating something means that you can make changes. You can work on a non-destructive way to do your thing, and that's super beneficial later on when we're doing dynamic and things like that. Alright, so I hope this is a good tutorial on everything that I can think of. Not everything, but some of the basic fundamentals on the modeling part, but there certainly will be more stuff that you can do with it. But we will not do more modeling here anymore in Houdini. We're going to focus on dynamic later on in later tutorials. Alright, thanks for watching. See you next time.